A millionaire with his life under control sees his world crumble when he locks eyes with a woman at the bus stop, accompanied by 3 children identical to him. Michael Collins observed his reflection in the office window on the 30th floor. Outside, Boston Harbor displayed a deep blue under the scorching summer sun. His brown eyes, slightly marked by age, analyzed the impeccably tailored suit he wore. At 45, Michael was the type of man who commanded respect by his presence alone. Owner of Collins Imports, one of the largest companies in the industry in the United States, he had transformed the small business inherited from his father into an empire. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. "Mr. Collins, the car is waiting." "Day of the property inspection in Beacon Hill," announced Margaret, his secretary. "I'm coming down," he replied curtly. Michael grabbed the folder with documents for the potential acquisition and entered the elevator. Collins Imports grew each year, and he needed a new space to expand operations. The building in Beacon Hill, an upscale area of the city, seemed perfect, another conquest to add to his collection of business successes. On the ground floor, Joseph, his driver for over 10 years, was already waiting with the car door open. "Good morning, Mr. Michael, to the building in Beacon Hill, right?" "Yes, and then straight to lunch with the investors at the Four Seasons." The black Mercedes glided through the streets of Boston. Michael reviewed documents while the car advanced through the morning traffic. His life was like this, orderly, predictable, meticulously constructed to avoid surprises. Since his divorce 7 years ago, he had dedicated himself exclusively to work. Relationships, only superficial ones that didn't threaten his emotional comfort zone. The building inspection was quick and efficient, like everything in his life. The property met his expectations, and Michael instructed his lawyer to begin negotiations. Returning to the car, he checked his watch. He still had time before lunch with the investors. "Joseph, let's go back via Commonwealth Avenue. I want to see how the new commercial center construction is coming along." The driver nodded and changed the route. Traffic flowed normally until, near a busy bus stop, a traffic jam forced them to reduce speed. Michael continued checking emails on his phone until something outside the window caught his attention. He looked up instinctively as if some invisible force compelled him to look. That's when he saw her, Sarah. His ex-wife was there, just a few meters away, holding shopping bags. She seemed thinner, with her face marked by an expression of fatigue that didn't match the vibrant young woman he had known years ago. Her black hair, now with a few grey strands, was tied in a simple bun. But it wasn't just the unexpected sight of Sarah that made Michael's heart race. Around her, 3 agitated boys were talking animatedly. The tallest, appearing about 6 years old, adjusted his shirt exactly as Michael had done since childhood. The middle one gestured while speaking, with the same enthusiasm that Michael displayed in important meetings. And the smallest, visibly more shy, observed everything with attentive and curious eyes. "My God," murmured Michael, feeling his mouth go dry. The 3 boys were identical to him. Same brown hair, same lightly tanned fair skin, same way of furrowing their brow. They were his features, his expressions, his gestures. The resemblance was so evident, so brutal, that it seemed to scream to anyone who passed by. "Is there a problem, sir?" asked Joseph, noticing the change in his employer's behavior. Michael didn't answer. He continued observing through the dark window of the car, protected by the tinted glass. A bus approached the stop, and Sarah hurried the children. Before boarding, the smallest of the boys stumbled, and Michael instinctively leaned forward, as if he could help him. Sarah quickly steadied him, checking if he was okay with a gesture that mixed firmness and affection. The bus departed, taking them away, but the image remained engraved in Michael's mind like a photograph. He remained silent during the entire journey to the restaurant. During lunch with the investors, he smiled mechanically, agreed with proposals, and pretended interest in conversations, but his mind was elsewhere. That night, alone in his luxury penthouse overlooking the water, Michael poured himself a generous serving of whiskey and walked to the balcony. The sea breeze carried the characteristic smell of Boston, a mixture of ocean, cuisine, and city life. He had never been a man of regrets. His decisions were always calculated, always thinking about what was best for his business, for his future. Are they? Divorce from Sarah 7 years ago had been another of those decisions. They had met when she was an intern at his company, freshly graduated with a degree in business administration. The romance was quick and intense, culminating in a hasty marriage that lasted only 3 years. The separation came when Michael realized their priorities were incompatible. He wanted growth, expansion, recognition. She desired a family, stability, time together. The last argument still echoed in his memory. "You'll never understand that there are things more important than money and power, Michael," Sarah had said with tears in her eyes. "One day you'll realize what you've lost." At the time, he considered that typical emotional exaggeration. Now, looking at the illuminated city below, her words took on a different weight. Michael picked up the phone and dialed a number. "George, it's Michael Collins. I need your services. It's urgent." George Parker was a private investigator who occasionally provided services to Michael's company, checking employee backgrounds or investigating possible fraud. He was discreet, efficient, and above all loyal to those who paid well. "I'm looking for information about Sarah Mitchell, my ex-wife. I want to know where she lives, where she works, and—" Michael hesitated for a moment. "I want to know everything. About her children. 3 boys. I want to know who their father is." He hung up the phone, feeling a mixture of anxiety and guilt. Part of him wanted to respect the distance that had been established between them after the divorce. But another part, stronger, needed to know the truth. Those boys had his appearance, his gestures. The possibility of having children he was unaware of was something that had never crossed his mind. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned in his king-size bed, reviewing the day's events. If those boys were his children, why had Sarah never told him? Why hide something so important? And mainly, how had he not noticed anything during all this time? The next morning, Michael cancelled all his appointments. For the first time in years, Collins Imports was not his priority. He stayed home, anxiously waiting for news from George. The report arrived late in the afternoon, faster than expected. Sarah lived in Somerville, a neighborhood far from the luxurious downtown where Michael lived. She worked as a teaching assistant at a public school and solely supported 3 children: Henry, 6 years old, Thomas, 5, and Caleb, 4. All 3 were born after the divorce. The father was not listed on the birth certificates. Michael felt his stomach sink. The dates matched perfectly. The pregnancy must have occurred shortly before the separation, when they were already emotionally distant, but still sharing the same house. Had Sarah discovered the pregnancy after he had already left? The report continued with details that made Michael feel ashamed of his own ignorance. Sarah had faced complications in the birth of the triplets, resulting in Caleb's prolonged hospitalization, as he was the most fragile. Her parents died in an accident shortly after the children's birth, leaving her without her main support network. She accumulated debts to cover medical expenses and only managed to get by thanks to the help of an elderly neighbor, Mrs. Winters, who took care of the children while she worked. Michael closed the folder, feeling the weight of the revelation. While he built his empire and worried about million-dollar acquisitions, Sarah struggled alone to raise 3 boys, his sons. The truth was now undeniable, and Michael needed to decide what to do with it. The following days were a whirlwind for Michael. For the first time in years, he had difficulty concentrating in meetings. He signed documents mechanically, while his mind wandered to George's report about Sarah and the boys. The photographs that the investigator had attached showed everyday scenes: Sarah taking the children to school, the 4 sitting on a park bench sharing a simple snack, the boys playing in the small garden of a modest house in Somerville. "You all right, sir?" asked Margaret after Michael let an error in an important contract slip by. "You seem distracted lately." "I'm just tired," he lied, adjusting his tie. "Schedule a massage for me at the end of the day." But Michael knew that no massage would relieve the weight he felt in his chest. George's report contained information that deeply disturbed him. The previous year, a colleague had proposed to Sarah. She refused, claiming that her priority was her children and that she could not trust in a relationship again. Michael imagined that moment, the determination on her face as she chose to continue alone, and felt a pang of admiration mixed with guilt. After 3 days turning this information over in his head, Michael made a decision. He needed to see with his own eyes. He asked George to give him the exact address and, on a Friday, dismissed Joseph and took a less conspicuous company car. Somerville was a traditional Boston neighborhood, far from the axis of luxury buildings and shopping centers. The streets were narrow, with simple and colorful houses, some still maintaining colonial architecture. Michael parked a few blocks from Sarah's residence and walked, feeling out of place with his Italian shoes and Swiss watch in that environment. The house was small, with blue paint faded by the sun and sea air. A small garden in front displayed well-tended flowers, and a maple tree grew in the side yard, offering generous shade. Michael observed from afar, hidden behind a fruit stand at the corner. It wasn't long before the door opened. Sarah came out, first wearing a simple skirt and a white blouse, her hair tied back as on the day he had seen her at the bus stop. Right behind came the 3 boys, each carrying a small backpack. Michael held his breath. Seeing them like this in daylight, without the filter of the car's dark glass, made the resemblance even more striking. Henry, the tallest, walked in, front, with a confident posture that reminded Michael of his corporate presentations. Thomas, the middle one, talked non-stop, gesturing animatedly. And Caleb, the youngest, firmly held his mother's hand, observing everything with attentive eyes. "Mum, can we stop by the ice cream shop later?" asked Henry, with the same intonation that Michael used when negotiating contracts. "We'll see how—" "The budget looks at the end of the month, son," Sarah replied, caressing the boy's hair. Michael felt a tightness in his chest. Budget. Something he never had to worry about, but which clearly was a constant in their lives. The 4 walked to the bus stop, and Michael followed them discreetly. They boarded a bus headed downtown, and he returned to his car, determined to continue his observation. During the following weeks, Michael established a surveillance routine. He discovered that Sarah taught at a public school in the Roxbury neighborhood, while the boys studied at a public school near home. In the late afternoons, they were cared for by Mrs. Winters, a white-haired lady who lived in the house next. Dora. On Saturdays, Sarah worked part-time as a tutor to supplement her income, and on Sundays the small family frequented the local park or Revere Beach when the weather permitted. During one of these observations, Michael witnessed something that deeply touched him. It was market day in the neighborhood, and Mrs. Winters was having difficulty carrying her purchases. Immediately, Sarah and the 3 boys ran to help. Even Caleb, the smallest, insisted on carrying a bag, refusing his mother's help. "I can do it, Mom. I'm already strong," he said, with determination in his eyes. "Of course you can, my love," Sarah replied, exchanging a knowing look with Mrs. Winters. "These boys are a blessing, Sarah," commented the elderly woman. "Raised with so much love, even with all the difficulties. They are my strength, Mrs. Winters. For them I would do anything." That scene strongly contrasted with the world in which Michael lived. In his social circle, children were raised by nannies and drivers, while parents built careers and empires. There, on that simple street in Somerville, there was a genuine connection, a real concern for each other's well-being. Michael continued his observations, becoming increasingly emotionally involved with that family that, technically, was also his. On a rainy Tuesday, he saw Sarah running with the boys under a single umbrella, all laughing as they squeezed together to avoid getting wet. On another day, he observed Henry helping Caleb with his shoelace, with impressive patience for a 6-year-old child. Their life was simple, but there was a solidity there that was lacking in the world of luxury and superficiality that Michael inhabited. In his spacious penthouse, he often found himself remembering the boys' laughter in the park, or the way Sarah looked at them with a mixture of pride and concern. George continued sending detailed reports, and one mentioned that the neighborhood school would organize a traditional 4th of July festival at the end of the month. Sarah was responsible for the bake sale booth to raise funds for the renovation of the local playground. Michael saw this as his opportunity to approach. On the night of the festival, he exchanged his suit for jeans and a simple shirt, took a taxi to Somerville and mingled with the crowd. The fair was set up in the central square, with red, white, and blue decorations and typical music playing. Food and game booths spread throughout the location, and children ran from one side to the other, dressed for the occasion. Michael located the bake sale booth and approached slowly. Sarah was there organizing trays of brownies and cookies. The three boys, dressed in patriotic t-shirts with small flag pins, helped by placing the treats in colorful wrappers. "How much for a brownie?" asked Michael, trying to disguise his nervousness. Sarah looked up and for an instant didn't recognize him. When she finally realized who it was, her eyes widened. "Michael." "Hi, Sarah," he replied, feeling his throat go dry. "It's been a while." She remained paralyzed for a few seconds, while the boys looked curiously at the stranger who was talking to their mother. "What are you doing here?" she finally asked in a low tone so the children wouldn't hear. "I heard about the festival. I came to contribute to the playground renovation," he replied, trying to sound casual. "How much for all the treats on the tray?" "Michael, you don't need to—" "Please," he interrupted. "It's for the neighborhood children, right? I want to help." Reluctantly, Sarah accepted the money that Michael extended, much more than the value of all the treats combined. He took just one brownie, giving the rest back so she could continue selling. "Mom, who is he?" asked Thomas, looking curiously at Michael. Sarah hesitated, panic visible in her eyes. "He's an old acquaintance, son." Michael bent down to be at the boy's height and smiled. "I like your mom very much. She's always been very intelligent and kind." Thomas smiled back, showing his missing front teeth. "My mom is the best in the world. She makes the best brownies and knows all the cool stories." "I believe it," Michael replied, feeling a strange emotion in his voice. "You're very lucky." He moved away before Sarah could say anything. For the rest of the night, he observed from a distance. He watched as the boys participated in the children's parade, each with his particular way. Henry led the steps, Thomas smiled in all directions, and Caleb seemed to dance only for himself, concentrated on getting the choreography right. Michael also noticed the glances that Sarah cast in his direction, a mixture of confusion, apprehension, and something else he couldn't identify. When the festival began to disperse, he left without saying goodbye, knowing that brief encounter had already shaken the balance carefully constructed by Sarah. Back in his apartment, Michael couldn't sleep. The image of Sarah and the boys at the festival wouldn't leave his mind. He stayed on the balcony until dawn, watching the sun rise over Boston Harbor, knowing he could no longer stay away. Those were his children, and he had lost 6 years of their lives. He wouldn't lose another day. The next morning, he called George with specific instructions. "I want to know everything about Sarah Mitchell's financial situation, debts, loans, late payments, everything. And I also want information about the school where she works and where the boys study." Michael knew he couldn't simply appear and claim his place in their lives. He needed to be cautious, gradual. Sarah's reaction at the festival had made it clear she wasn't ready to confront the past. But he would find a way, even if it meant starting as a stranger who just wanted to help. George's report on Sarah's financial situation arrived 2 days later. As Michael suspected, she faced considerable difficulties. A loan taken out to cover Caleb's medical expenses, who was born with respiratory problems, consumed a good part of her salary. There was also a late payment on the small used car she had bought to facilitate transporting the boys, in addition to basic bills like water and electricity, always at the deadline limit. Michael felt a tightness in his chest as he read the details. While he lived in a luxury penthouse and didn't need to check the price of anything before buying, Sarah counted pennies to ensure the basics for her children. His children. "George, I want you to do something discreetly," Michael instructed. "By phone. I want you to pay off Sarah Mitchell's loan. Use an intermediary company. Say it's a bank refinancing program, anything that seems plausible. She can't know it comes from me." "Understood, Mr. Collins. Anything else?" Michael hesitated for a moment, thinking about what else he could do, without raising suspicions. "Yes, contact the school where the boys study. I want to make an anonymous donation that directly benefits their class. New books, school supplies, whatever is necessary." In the following days, Michael dedicated himself to small actions that he hoped would improve Sarah and the boys' lives without revealing his identity. Through George, he hired a renovation company to correct structural problems in the Somerville house, presenting the service as part of a municipal neighborhood revitalization program. When he learned that the school where Sarah worked needed a computer teacher, he arranged for an educational foundation to donate computers and offer scholarships for teacher training. Sarah was one of those selected. At the same time, he continued discreetly observing the family's routine. On a Saturday morning, he parked near Revere Beach and saw when Sarah arrived with the boys. It was one of their rare leisure moments, and Michael noticed how each child had his own way of enjoying the day. Henry built elaborate sandcastles with towers and moats. Thomas ran along the water's edge, collecting shells and small stones. Caleb stayed closer to his mother, drawing figures in the sand with a stick. Michael felt a pang of envy for those simple moments. His own father, always busy with business, rarely had time to take him to the beach when he was a child. His mother's secretary was the one who accompanied him on outings, while his parents expanded the company. It was at this moment that Michael realized that despite all the financial difficulties, Sarah was giving the boys something he never had: presents. "They deserve more," he murmured to himself, determined to intensify his help. The following week, when Sarah went to check her bank account balance, she was shocked to discover that her loan had been paid off as part of a special program for single mothers with young children. The bank manager, instructed by George, explained that she had been selected for her punctuality in previous payments, but that's a lot of money, stammered Sarah, incredulous. "It's a new social program, Mum. You were one of the lucky ones," replied the manager, following the prepared script. Sarah left the bank with tears in her eyes, not fully understanding what had happened, but feeling that an enormous weight had been lifted from her shoulders. That night she bought an ice cream for each child to celebrate, allowing herself a small luxury she normally avoided. Michael observed the scene from the ice cream shop from afar, feeling a deep satisfaction at seeing the smiles on the four faces. It was little compared to what he could offer, but it was a start. The anonymous actions continued. Educational books mysteriously appeared in the boys' backpacks, presented as part of a reading incentive project. A complete school supply kit for the next year was delivered in the name of an educational foundation. The school where Sarah worked received a visit from a dentist who offered free treatment for employees and their families, another initiative orchestrated by Michael. Gradually, he began to notice subtle changes. Sarah seemed less tired, her face more relaxed. The boys gained new toys, more suitable clothes for the Boston winter, and even a tablet for studying, shared among the three. "We need to be grateful for these blessings that are coming into our lives," Michael heard Sarah tell her children as he passed near the open window of the house during one of his visits. "It's like magic, Mom," exclaimed Thomas, always the most enthusiastic. "Do we have a fairy godmother?" "Maybe we do, son," she replied with an enigmatic smile. "But always remember that, with or without magic, the four of us are strong together." Those words kept echoing in Michael's mind. The four of us are strong together. The phrase evidenced the unity that Sarah had built with her children, an emotional fortress that, he was beginning to realize, might not have space for a fifth element. Even so, Michael could no longer imagine his life without those four people. For the first time in years, he felt a purpose that went beyond expanding his company or closing lucrative deals. His routine now included thinking of ways to improve Sarah and the boys' lives, always from a distance, always as an anonymous benefactor. One afternoon, while Michael was reviewing some contracts in his office, George called with alarming news. "Mr. Collins, I just found out that Sarah Mitchell received an eviction notice. The owner sold the property and demands evacuation in 30 days. Michael felt his blood freeze. "What do you mean? She has a contract, doesn't she?" "Yes, but it was an informal agreement, without much legal value. The new owner wants the house empty for complete renovation." "And where will she go with 3 young children?" "From what I understood in the conversations I managed to pick up, She's desperately looking for a new place, but rents in the neighborhood have gone up a lot, and she doesn't have savings for a deposit and first month's rent on a new property. Michael hung up the phone and remained silent, contemplating the situation. This wasn't a problem he could solve with an anonymous donation or a fictitious social program. It was a real emergency that required an immediate solution. After much reflection, he made a decision that would change the course of everything. He could no longer hide behind anonymous help. It was time to offer direct support face to face. The next morning, Michael drove to Somerville. He parked in front of Sarah's house and, taking a deep breath, knocked on the door. It was Henry, who answered, looking at him with curiosity. "Hi, you're the man from the 4th of July festival, aren't you?" Michael smiled, surprised to be remembered. "Yes, that's me. Is your mom home?" "Mom, it's that guy from the festival," shouted Henry, running inside. Sarah appeared at the door seconds later, visibly surprised and suspicious. "Michael, what are you doing here?" "We need to talk, Sarah. It's important." She hesitated, looking back where the 3 boys were watching curiously. Finally, she grabbed a light jacket and came out, closing the door behind her. "Let's talk out here. Mrs. Winters is with the boys." They walked to a small bench in the nearby park. Michael noticed that Sarah maintained a safe distance, as if fearing some kind of approach. "I heard you received an eviction notice," he began, deciding to get straight to the point. Sarah stiffened, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "How do you know that?" Michael hesitated. He couldn't reveal about George, about the surveillance, about all the anonymous help. "Does it matter? I'm here to help." "After 7 years, why now, Michael?" The question hung between them, loaded with all the other unasked questions. "Why? Did you leave? Why did you never try to find out about me? Why are you really here?" Michael took a deep breath, carefully choosing his words. "I saw them, Sarah, at the bus stop a few months ago. I saw you and the boys." She paled, immediately understanding what he meant. "They're my children, aren't they?" he asked, finally verbalizing the question that consumed him. Sarah looked away, fixing her gaze on the trees in the park nearby. For a long moment, only the sound of distant traffic filled the silence between them. "Yes," she finally answered in a low voice, "they're your children." Michael closed his eyes, feeling the impact of the confirmation. One thing was to suspect, to see the similarities, to deduce from the dates. Something completely different was to hear the truth from her mouth. "Why did you never tell me?" he asked, trying to control the mixture of emotions that dominated him. "You made it very clear that you didn't want a family, Michael. You said in so many words that children weren't in your plans. When I discovered the pregnancy, you had already left, already building your new life, focused on your empire. I had the right to know." "And what would you have done?" she countered, with a firmness that surprised him. "Would you have come back out of obligation? Would you have offered money and then gone on with your life? Or worse, would you have suggested that I not have the babies?" Michael had no answer to those questions. 7 years ago, obsessed with the company's growth and convinced that a family would hinder his plans, what would he really have done? "They don't know about you," continued Sarah. "For them, the father is an absent figure who isn't part of our lives. I don't lie to them, but I also don't go into details. When they ask, I say they'll understand one day." Michael felt a deep pain imagining his children growing up without knowing him, accepting his absence as a fact of life. "I want to help now, Sarah. With the eviction, with everything." She gave a bitter laugh. "Now? After 6 years? What changed, Michael? Are your businesses already secure enough for you to afford the luxury of having a family?" Her words hit him like a punch. There was truth there, a truth he wasn't ready to face. But there was also the immediate reality, a mother with 3 children about to become homeless. "My apartment has 4 bedrooms," he said, ignoring the provocation. "You and the boys can stay there while you look for a new place, or until you decide what to do. Live with you? Are you crazy?" "I'm not proposing that we get back together, Sarah. I'm offering a safe roof for my children during an emergency. You can occupy the master suite. I'll take the guest room. The boys will have space, comfort, and you'll have time to find a permanent solution." Sarah stared at him for a long time, evaluating the proposal and the man in front of her. Michael could see the conflict in her eyes, pride fighting against practical need, distrust against the exhaustion of years struggling alone. "Why should I trust you now?" she finally asked. Michael didn't have a ready, rehearsed answer. He had only the truth, simple and direct. "Because I want to know them too, Sarah. I want to know my children." The move happened on a Sunday. Michael hired a specialized company, and Sarah and the boys' few belongings were carefully packed and transported to his apartment on the waterfront. During the entire process, he kept himself discreetly apart, allowing Sarah to organize everything, according to her will. "Wow, Mom, it's like a palace," exclaimed Thomas, running from one room to another, eyes widened at the amplitude of the apartment. "It's very big," agreed Caleb, the shyest, firmly holding Sarah's hand while observing the panoramic view of Boston Harbor. Henry, always the most analytical, walked slowly through the space, touching the designer furniture, examining the paintings on the walls. "Why are we going to live in this man's house, Mom?" Sarah exchanged a quick glance with Michael, who kept himself discreetly in the corner of the living room. They had agreed not to immediately tell the boys about the kinship. It would be too big of a shock, too sudden a change. They needed time for the children to get used to his presence first. "Mr. Michael is a friend who is helping us for a while until we find our new house," she explained, carefully choosing her words. "He's very rich," commented Henry, observing Michael with curiosity. Michael smiled, uncomfortable. "I've been lucky in business, that's all." "We're lucky to have Mom," retorted the boy with a fierce loyalty that made Michael feel a pang of pride mixed with sadness. The first days were strange, with everyone moving cautiously through the space as if walking on eggshells. Michael tried to keep himself discreet, leaving early for work and returning only at dinner time. Sarah, in turn, continued her routine. At school, taking the boys with her in the morning and returning in the afternoon. In the shared meals, the conversation was formal, polite, revolving around safe subjects like the weather or general city news. The boys, always attentive, observed the interaction between the adults, clearly confused by the dynamic. It was, during the first weekend, that Michael began to try a more genuine approach. He woke up early on Saturday and prepared breakfast, something he hadn't done in years since he lived alone during college. The result wasn't the best: slightly burnt toast, overcooked eggs, slightly sour orange juice. "What's this?" asked Thomas, appearing in the kitchen, still in pajamas, hair tousled. "I tried to make breakfast," admitted Michael, embarrassed. "I'm not very good at it." The boy approached, observing the table with curiosity. "You never make food?" "Usually I order from the restaurant, or the housekeeper prepares it before I wake up. Mom says it's important to know how to cook. It's a way of caring for people we like," commented Thomas, taking a piece of toast and bravely biting it, making a funny face afterward. That simple observation hit Michael like a revelation. Cooking as a form of care. Something so basic, so fundamental, and that he had never considered. His demonstrations of affection had always come in the form of expensive gifts, dinners at starred restaurants, international trips. Never something made with his own hands, imperfect but genuine. "Can you teach me how to make toast right?" he asked, feeling strangely vulnerable, asking for help from a 5-year-old child. Thomas's face lit up. "I know. Mom lets me help on weekends." Minutes later, Henry and Caleb also appeared in the kitchen, attracted by the noise and laughter. Soon all four were involved in an improvised basic cooking class, with the boys showing Michael how to prepare toast at the right point, creamy scrambled eggs and fresh juice. Sarah found the scene upon waking. Her temporary kitchen in complete chaos, flour scattered on the floor, orange peels on the counter, and the four concentrated on not letting the pancakes they were now trying to make burn. "What's going on here?" she asked, paralyzed at the door. "We're teaching Uncle Michael how to cook, Mom," explained Thomas, excited. "He didn't know anything." "Nothing at all, Mom," agreed Caleb, laughing timidly. "He even burned the coffee water." Michael looked at Sarah, expecting to see irritation at the chaos, but found only a surprised look and something more, perhaps a flash of recognition that he was, in fact, trying. "Well, "It seems you're having fun," she commented, grabbing a broom to help clean up. "Can we make pancakes every Saturday?" asked Henry, looking hopefully at his mother and then at Michael. It was a small but significant moment, the first time one of the boys included Michael in a future plan, as if his presence were expected, desired. "Of course," Michael replied, feeling a lump in his throat. "Every Saturday." That chaotic breakfast marked a change in the house dynamic. In the days that followed, Michael began to adjust his routine to be more present. He left work earlier to pick up the boys from school once a week, giving Sarah time to participate in a specialization course she had always wanted to take. In the evenings, he became involved in homework, discovering with surprise that Henry had a facility with numbers, Thomas loved stories, and Caleb showed a natural talent for drawing. Sarah observed this approach with a mixture of gratitude and fear. On one hand, she saw how the boys benefited from the male presence, something they had always lacked. On the other, she feared creating expectations that could be frustrated when they eventually moved out. "I don't want them to get attached and then suffer," she commented one night after the children were already asleep. Michael and Sarah were on the balcony sharing a tea. She had refused the wine he offered, explaining that she no longer drank since the pregnancy. "I'm not going to disappear from their lives, Sarah," he replied, serious. "Even when you find a new place." "How can I be sure? You disappeared once." The accusation hung between them, heavy as lead. Michael knew she had reason to distrust. "I was a different person," he finally admitted. "Someone who thought success meant only money and recognition. I was wrong." Sarah studied him for a long moment, as if trying to see beyond the surface, looking for signs of truth in his words. What changed then? Michael thought about the question. What had really changed? Was it the shock of discovering the children, the guilt for having been absent, or something deeper, a transformation that was already underway even before that casual encounter at the bus stop? "I realized I built an empty empire," he finally replied. "I have a prosperous company, apartments in 3 states, luxury cars, and no one to share them with, no one who really cares if I come home or not." He paused, taking a sip of tea to disguise the emotion rising to his throat. "Seeing you with the boys, the connection you have, the way you support each other, it was like seeing what was always missing in my life." Sarah didn't respond immediately, absorbing his words. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, almost nostalgic. "You know what's ironic? For years I wanted you to realize exactly that, to understand that some things are more important than contracts and business." "I know, I was an idiot." A light smile touched her lips. "I won't disagree." That conversation on the balcony didn't solve all the problems between them, but it opened a channel for more honest communication. In the following days, small gestures of trust began to appear. Sarah started leaving notes on the refrigerator when she went out with the boys for some outing, inviting Michael to meet them later. He in turn consulted her before buying gifts for the children, respecting the limits she established. One night during dinner, Caleb surprised everyone with an unexpected question. "Uncle Michael, why do you look like us?" The table went silent. Henry and Thomas looked curiously at their younger brother, then at Michael, as if noticing the resemblance for the first time. Michael felt his heart race. He looked at Sarah, seeking guidance. They had talked about when and how to tell the truth to the children, but hadn't reached a consensus. Sarah took a deep breath and nodded slightly, giving him permission to respond with honesty. "I look like you," Michael began, carefully choosing his words, "because I'm your father." The silence that followed seemed to last an eternity. Henry furrowed his brow, processing the information. Thomas looked from Michael to Sarah, seeking confirmation. Caleb simply continued observing, as if the answer merely confirmed something he already suspected. "You're our real father?" Henry finally asked, his voice a mixture of confusion and hope. "Yes," Michael replied, feeling his throat tighten. "I'm the father of all 3 of you." "But why did you never come to see us before?" questioned Thomas, going straight to the most painful point. Michael felt the weight of the question like a punch to the stomach. How to explain years of absence to a 5-year-old child? How to justify having prioritized his ambition over knowing his own children? Because I made a very big mistake, he replied, opting for sincerity. I didn't know you were born, but even before that, I wasn't a good partner to your mother. I was so concerned with my work, with making money, that I didn't realize what was really important. And now you know? Asked Caleb, surprising everyone with the depth of the question. Michael looked at that small face, so similar to his own, and felt something break inside him, a last barrier of self-defense, of emotional distance. Now I know, he replied, his voice choked, and I'm trying to fix things if you'll give me a chance. Henry, always the protector, looked at his mother. What do you think, Mum? Sarah had tears in her eyes, but her voice was firm when she replied, I think everyone deserves a second chance, son, even adults who make mistakes. Thomas, impulsive, as always, got up from his chair and hugged Michael without warning. I always wanted a dad, he said simply. Henry was more reserved, extending his hand like a small adult. You'll have to prove you deserve to be our dad, he declared seriously. Caleb said nothing, just slipped off his chair and approached slowly, observing Michael with his attentive eyes. When he finally spoke, it was almost a whisper. Are you going to leave again? Michael felt his heart break with that question. He bent down to be at the boy's height and responded in the most sincere way possible. No, Caleb, I'm never going to leave again. That night, after the boys finally fell asleep, after hours of questions and conversations, Michael found Sarah again on the balcony. She was wrapped in a light blanket, looking at the city lights. Thank you for being honest with them, she said, without looking at him. It was the least I could do. You realize the responsibility you just took on, don't you? You promised. You wouldn't leave. They'll hold you to that, Michael, every day. He nodded, feeling the weight of that promise. I know, and I intend to keep it. It's not just about money or material comfort, she continued. They need presence, consistency. They need to know they can count on you when they get sick in the middle of the night, when they have nightmares, when they fight at school. I'm ready for all that, Sarah. She finally turned to face him, her eyes serious and challenging. Are you really? Because if you're not, if this is just a passing whim, an attempt to relieve your guilt, then it's better to say so now. I've already raised these boys alone for 6 years. I can continue doing that. Michael held her gaze, recognizing the strength of this woman who had faced so many difficulties without ever giving up on her children. It's not a whim, he replied firmly. It's a commitment to them and, if you'll allow it, to you too. The words hung between them, loaded with meaning. It wasn't a declaration of love, nor a request to become a couple again. It was something more fundamental, a recognition that they were inevitably connected by 3 small lives that depended on both of them. One day at a time, Michael, Sarah finally replied, her expression softening slightly. Let's see if you've really changed. In the days that followed, the house dynamic changed completely. The boys, now aware that Michael was their father, bombarded him with questions about his childhood, his likes, his abilities. They wanted to recover lost time, to know every detail of this man who was now part of their lives. Michael strived to meet all the demands. He learned to balance important meetings with school presentations, to postpone video conferences, to take care of sudden fevers, to exchange business dinners for family game nights. The transformation didn't go unnoticed by his team. Margaret, his secretary for years, commented in surprise when he refused an important international trip to attend Henry's first soccer match at school. You're different, Mr. Collins, she observed. More human. Michael smiled, realizing it was true. For the first time in his adult life, his priorities were clear. Business remained important, but had found its proper place in his scale of values. The most significant change, however, was in his relationship with Sarah. Daily coexistence, the shared challenges of raising 3 energetic boys, the small victories, celebrated together. All this created a new connection between them, different from what they had lived years before. It wasn't the passionate and impulsive romance of youth, but something deeper, built on the foundation of mutual respect and shared commitment to the children's well-being. Gradually, the barriers that Sarah kept erected began to yield, allowing glimpses of the strong and loving woman she had become in the years of separation. 3 months passed since Sarah and the boys moved into Michael's apartment. What was meant to be a temporary arrangement began to take on an air of permanence, with small changes that transformed the sophisticated and impersonal environment into a true home. Colorful drawings adorned the stainless steel refrigerator, toys scattered throughout the previously immaculate living room, and photographs of the boys replaced the abstract artwork that previously decorated the walls. The initial deadline for finding a new house had been extended several times, always with a different excuse. Sometimes the neighborhood wasn't suitable, sometimes the school was too far, sometimes the property didn't have enough space for 3 active children. Deep down, both Michael and Sarah knew they were just postponing a decision that neither wanted to make. On a Sunday afternoon, while Michael was helping Thomas with a solar system model for the science fair, the boy asked a question that took his father by surprise. "Dad, why are we still looking for another house if everyone is happy here?" Michael stopped painting the small Saturn he had in his hands and looked at his son. The naturalness with which Thomas now called him Dad still moved him every time he heard it. "Well, this apartment is temporary. Your mother probably wants a place that's really yours." Thomas frowned, confused. "But don't you want to stay with us forever?" "Of course I do, son, more than anything. Then why don't we all stay together? You, me, Mom, Henry, and Caleb?" The innocent question touched on a sensitive point. Michael and Sarah had re-established a good relationship of friendship and partnership in raising the children, but the romantic aspect remained. Unexplored territory, surrounded by uncertainties and unspoken fears. "It's complicated, Thomas," Michael replied, trying to find words that a 5-year-old could understand. "Adults sometimes need time to resolve certain things. Like you and Mom fighting in the past?" Michael smiled sadly. "The boys were too perceptive for their own good." "Something like that. But we're working on it, okay?" Thomas nodded, apparently satisfied with the answer, and turned his attention back to the model. But the question continued echoing in Michael's mind for the rest of the day. That same night, after the boys went to sleep, he found Sarah in the kitchen, preparing lunchboxes for the next day. It was a domestic scene that had become familiar. Her separating fruits, making sandwiches, organizing everything with quiet efficiency. "I need to ask you something," said Michael, pouring himself a glass of water. Sarah raised her eyes, curious. "What is it? Are you still looking for another place to live?" She stopped what she was doing, thoughtful. "To be honest, I haven't been actively looking in the last few weeks." "Why?" Sarah hesitated, carefully choosing her words. "The boys are happy here. The school is close, they have space to play, and—" She paused, as if deciding whether she should continue. "And they need you, Michael. They need their father present." "And you?" he asked, taking a step forward. "What do you need, Sarah?" The question hung between them, loaded with unspoken meanings. For a moment, Michael saw the vulnerability in her eyes, a rare opening in the armor she had built over the years. "Need stability," she finally replied. "I need to know that I'm not making the same mistake twice." "What mistake?" "Trusting you." The words hurt, but Michael knew they were fair. He had left once to build his empire. What guarantee did she have that history wouldn't repeat itself? "I understand your fear," he said after a moment of silence, "and I know words don't mean much after everything that happened. But I'm willing to prove, with actions, that I've changed, that you four are my priority now." Sarah studied him for a long moment, as if trying to see beyond the surface, to the core of his intentions. "Let's give it more time," she decided. "See how things evolve." "But Michael—" "Yes?" "I can't risk the boys' emotional well-being. If at any point I feel it's not working, that you're reverting to old patterns, I'll move forward, with or without your help." Michael nodded, recognizing the determination behind those words. It wasn't a threat, but a declaration of principles, from a mother who put her children above everything. "That's fair," he agreed. In the following weeks, Michael intensified his efforts to show that his commitment was real and lasting. He reorganized the company so he could work more from home, delegating responsibilities he previously considered undelegatable. He became actively involved in the boys' school, participating in the parent council and even volunteering to help with the library renovation. One day, to everyone's surprise, he invited Mrs. Winters for dinner. The former neighbor who had supported Sarah so much in difficult times had become an important figure in the boys' lives, a surrogate grandmother who filled the void left by biological grandparents. "I want to personally thank you for everything you did for my family when I wasn't present," Michael said to the lady with sincere gratitude. Mrs. Winters, a 70-year-old woman with keen eyes that didn't forgive falsehoods, evaluated him critically. "What's important isn't what you did or didn't do in the past, my son," she replied, with the wisdom of years. "It's what you do now every day that defines who you are." Those simple words touched Michael deeply. Indeed, it was the small daily actions that were, little by little, rebuilding trust and solidifying family bonds. It was getting up in the middle of the night when Caleb had nightmares. It was helping Henry with math exercises, even after an exhausting day of work. It was remembering that Thomas was allergic to strawberries and always checking the ingredients of the food he bought. The relationship with Sarah also evolved, slowly but steadily. They began to have moments just for themselves, after the boys fell asleep. Conversations on the balcony that extended into the early hours, sharing stories from the years apart, rediscovering themselves as different adults than they had been. During the marriage, Michael discovered that Sarah had become stronger, more self-assured, capable of facing adversities that would have destroyed less resilient people. She in turn realized that Michael was no longer the ambitious young man obsessed with success, but a man who had learned, albeit belatedly, to value what really mattered. On one of these nights, while sharing a bottle of wine, Sarah had returned to drinking occasionally. She brought up a subject they hadn't fully discussed. "Why did you never remarry?" she asked. "After me, I mean." Michael swirled the wine in his glass, thoughtful. "There were some women, of course. Brief, convenient relationships, nothing serious." "Why? You seemed so determined not to have a family when we were together." "I think deep down I knew I had made a mistake in leaving you," he admitted, surprising himself with the honesty. "But I was too proud to admit it, so I immersed myself in work, convincing myself that was what I really wanted." Sarah nodded, understanding. "For years I hated you for it, for choosing your ambition over us. With reason. But you know what's strange? With time, I came to be grateful." Michael raised his eyebrows, surprised. "Grateful? If you had stayed at that time out of obligation, we would have been unhappy, you weren't ready, and I would have resented. Being a burden in your life, an obstacle to your dreams. You were never an obstacle, Sarah. I was the one who didn't know how to value what we had." She smiled slightly. "Maybe. But look at us now. You're a different man. I'm a different woman. And maybe we needed those years apart to become the people we are today." There was a wisdom in those words that touched Michael. He extended his hand across the table, touching her fingers lightly. It was a simple gesture, but loaded with meaning. The first physical contact initiated by him that wasn't related to the boys or practical house matters. Sarah didn't withdraw her hand. Her eyes met his, and for a moment time seemed suspended. There was no kiss, no grand declarations, just that silent connection, a mutual recognition that something was being reborn between them, different from what it was before, but potentially stronger, more mature. The moment was interrupted by a scream coming from the boys' room. It was Caleb, having one of his recurring nightmares. Both rose immediately, the parental instinct overriding any other emotion. When they reached the room, they found Henry already consoling his younger brother, hugging him protectively. "He dreamed we were all on a boat and you fell in the water." "Dad," explained Henry, worried. Michael sat on the bed, pulling Caleb onto his lap. "It was just a dream, son. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." "Promise?" asked the boy between sobs. "I promise." Sarah observed the scene with tear-filled eyes. There was something deeply moving in the image of Michael, once so focused on business and material conquests, now dedicating all his attention to comforting a frightened little boy. That night, after the boys went back to sleep, they didn't resume the interrupted conversation on the balcony. But something had changed between them. An invisible barrier had been knocked down. In the following days, small gestures of affection began to emerge naturally. A touch on the shoulder when passing, a light kiss on the cheek when saying goodbye. In the morning, knowing smiles when one of the boys did something funny. They were subtle but significant signs that the relationship was evolving beyond friendly co-parenting. The real transformation, however, came with an unexpected event. Caleb, the most fragile of the three, had always had respiratory problems since birth. On an autumn morning, he woke up with a high fever and difficulty breathing. "We need to take him to the hospital," Sarah decided, after unsuccessfully trying, to lower the fever with medication. Michael picked up the boy in his arms, feeling the abnormal heat emanating from the small body. "I'll call Dr. Marcus. He'll meet us at the hospital." Dr. Marcus Williams was one of the best pediatric pulmonologists in Boston, a longtime friend of Michael. In less than an hour, Caleb was being attended to in a private room, receiving oxygen and intravenous medication. "It's pneumonia," the doctor explained. "Not very serious, but we need to monitor closely because of his history." Sarah nodded, her face pale with concern. Michael firmly held her hand, silently conveying his support. "How long will he need to stay hospitalized?" he asked. "At least 3 days to ensure the medication is working properly," the doctor replied. "Can we stay with him?" asked Sarah. "Of course. One of you can remain in the room during the night." When the doctor left, Sarah turned to Michael. "I need to notify the school that I won't be able to teach tomorrow, and the boy—" "I'll take care of everything," he interrupted. "I'll take Henry and Thomas home, explain the situation, and arrange for someone to stay with them. Then I'll come back to spend the night here while you rest a bit." "No," she protested. "I want to stay with Caleb." "Sarah, you haven't slept properly for 2 nights, taking care of him at home. You're exhausted. You need to rest to be strong for him tomorrow." She hesitated, clearly torn between the desire not to leave her son and the awareness that Michael was right. "Trust me?" he asked, holding her hands. "I'm his father too. I can take care of him tonight." Those words, simple but profound, seemed to touch Sarah. It was the first time Michael explicitly claimed his role as a father, not just as a right, but as a responsibility he was ready to fully assume. "All right," she finally agreed. "But call me if there's any change, no matter how small." "I promise." The night in the hospital was long. Michael remained by Caleb's bed, observing his son's restless sleep, adjusting the oxygen mask when necessary, checking the temperature, every hour as per the nurse's instructions. At one point, the boy woke up looking confused around him until fixing his eyes on his father. "Where's Mom?" he asked, his voice weak. "She went to rest a bit, son. She'll be back early tomorrow." Caleb nodded, accepting the explanation. Then, to Michael's surprise, he extended his small hand to hold his. "Stay with me, Dad?" "Always," Michael replied, feeling a lump in his throat. "I'll always stay with you." The boy went back to sleep, still holding his father's hand. Michael remained like this, motionless, fearing to disturb that precious moment of trust. It was there, in the silence of that hospital room, illuminated only by the dim light of the heart monitor, that Michael finally understood the true meaning of fatherhood. It wasn't just about shared DNA or legal obligations. It was about being present, unconditionally and completely, in good and bad moments. It was about putting another person's needs above your own, without hesitation, without question. When Sarah returned the next morning, she found the two sleeping, Caleb in the hospital bed, Michael in the chair beside him, still holding his son's hand. For an instant she stood at the door, absorbing the image. Then, silently, she approached and touched Michael's shoulder. He woke up immediately, his eyes seeking Caleb first, then turning to her. "How did he spend the night?" asked Sarah. "The fever broke around 3 in the morning. The doctor came by at 5 and said his lungs are already responding well to the medication." She nodded, visibly relieved. Then, without warning, she leaned down and kissed Michael lightly on the lips. It was a brief, almost chaste kiss, but loaded with emotion. "Thank you," she said simply. Michael looked at her, surprised and touched. For what? For being the father they deserve. Those words, more than any declaration of love, meant everything to Michael. It was the recognition of his transformation, the acceptance of his legitimate place in the lives of those four beings, who had become the center of his universe. Caleb was discharged 2 days later, faster than initially predicted. The family returned home where Henry and Thomas anxiously awaited, the apartment decorated with get-well drawings made by themselves. That night, after putting all 3 boys to sleep together in the same room, Henry and Thomas had insisted on staying close to their brother. Michael found Sarah on the balcony, their usual place for important conversations. "I've been thinking," she began, looking at the horizon where the city lights met the dark sea. "It doesn't make sense to keep looking for another house." Michael felt his heart race but kept his voice calm. "No? No, the boys are happy here. It's close to school, to work, to the hospital if Caleb needs it again." She paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "And well, I think we're finding our way back to each other." Michael approached, taking courage to ask the question he had been rehearsing for weeks. "What do you think about making this official, then?" Sarah turned to him, surprised. "What do you mean?" "Being together. Officially. As a family." It wasn't exactly a marriage proposal, but it carried the same weight, the same promise of commitment. Sarah studied him for a long time, as if looking for signs of doubt or hesitation in his face. "Are you sure about this, Michael? Is it not just gratitude for having discovered the boys, or guilt for the lost time?" "It's much more than that," he replied, holding her hands. "It's realizing that I spent years building a life that had no real meaning without you in it. It's finally understanding that success isn't measured by bank accounts or closed deals, but by the difference we make in the lives of the people we love." Sarah smiled, her eyes shining with contained tears. "You really have changed. Thanks to you." He moved closer, touching her face gently. "So, what do you say? Shall we try again, this time doing it right?" For a moment, she didn't answer, and Michael felt his heart tighten with the possibility of a rejection. Then slowly, Sarah leaned forward, sealing her answer with a kiss that contained promises of a shared future. When they separated, she had a serene smile on her lips. "Yes," she replied simply. "Let's try again." Sarah and Michael's decision to rebuild their family didn't mean all problems instantly disappeared. Like any relationship rebuilt on old ruins, there were moments of uncertainty, of momentary doubts, of old fears resurfacing in stressful situations. But there was also something new, the shared determination to face challenges together, the mutual understanding that love, to last, needs to be a daily choice. In the months that followed, small and large transformations occurred in the family. Dynamic. Michael decided to reduce his workload even more, delegating responsibilities to trusted executives and refusing long trips that would keep him away for more than 2 days. The company remained prosperous, but now occupied a more balanced space in his life. Sarah, in turn, accepted Michael's financial support without giving up her independence. She continued teaching, but now could also dedicate herself to an old dream, pursuing a master's degree in education, focusing on inclusive methodologies. On nights when she had class, Michael fully assumed care of the boys, preparing dinner, supervising baths and homework, telling stories before bedtime. Who would have thought that the powerful businessman Michael Collins knows how to make spaghetti and meatballs, joked Margaret, his secretary, seeing him leaving the office hurriedly with grocery bags on a day when Sarah had a seminar in her master's program. "And it's not just spaghetti," he replied, with a proud smile. "You should try my roast chicken with potatoes. Even Mrs. Winters asked for the recipe." Small moments like this evidenced Michael's profound transformation. The man who once measured success exclusively by numbers in financial statements now celebrated achievements like teaching Thomas to ride a bike without training wheels, helping Henry overcome his fear of diving in the deep end of the pool, or simply getting Caleb to try a new food. The changes also extended to the relationship with Sarah. Daily coexistence revealed aspects of each other that they didn't know or had forgotten during the years apart. Michael discovered that Sarah had developed a taste for documentaries about ancient architecture, while she was surprised to learn that he secretly collected vinyl records of American jazz. "Why did you never tell me about this?" she asked one night, exploring the collection he kept in a rarely opened cabinet. "When we were married before, I thought I needed to maintain a certain image." The ambitious young executive focused only on business. He picked up a John Coltrane record, running his fingers over the cover affectionately. It seemed frivolous to dedicate time to something so personal. Sarah observed him with a mixture of sadness and understanding. "We hid so much from each other back then." "Not this time," promised Michael, putting the record to play on the vintage turntable that occupied a corner of the living room. "No masks, no characters, just ourselves with all the imperfections." He extended his hand, inviting her to dance in the partially lit room. Sarah accepted, and for a few minutes they moved slowly to the sound of piano and saxophone, rediscovering the comfort of each other's arms, the familiarity that had persisted despite the years apart. The boys, observing the scene from the hallway, exchanged knowing smiles. For them, seeing their parents together like this confirmed what they already intuitively felt, that their small family had finally found the right balance. Michael's integration into all aspects of his children's lives continued advancing. He made a point of getting to know the teachers, the little friends, the parents of classmates. He actively participated in the school community, often surprising everyone with his willingness for practical tasks, such as helping to set up booths, have the science fair or painting sets for the school play. "I confess I had a very different image of you," commented teacher Janine, who taught Caleb. "When I heard you owned Collins Imports, I imagined someone more arrogant, distant," completed Michael with a self-aware smile. "Let's say less hands-on," she replied diplomatically. "I was exactly as you imagined," he admitted. "But I discovered there's more satisfaction in painting papier-mâché sets with my son than in closing million-dollar contracts." This new perspective of Michael also reverberated in his business decisions. For the first time, he began to direct a significant part of the company's profits to social projects, with a special focus on educational programs for children from underprivileged communities. Inspired by Sarah's experience as a teacher in public schools, he created a foundation that offered scholarships and school supplies to promising students from low-income families. "You don't need to do this to impress anyone," commented Sarah when he mentioned the creation of the foundation. "I'm not trying to impress," he replied, sincere. "I'm trying to give back. Seeing up close the reality of public schools, understanding the challenges you faced all these years, opened my eyes to privileges I didn't even realize I had." The foundation quickly became a project shared by the family. Sarah contributed with her pedagogical experience, helping to structure truly effective programs. The boys participated in events, interacting with other children and developing from an early age a social awareness that Michael had never had in his own privileged childhood. On a Saturday afternoon, while helping with the distribution of school kits in a community on the outskirts of Boston, Michael felt a tug on his shirt sleeve. It was Henry, now 7 years old, his face serious as always when he had something important to say. "Dad, I think we should do more than deliver supplies," declared the boy with the characteristic conviction that reminded Michael so much of himself. "That boy over there told me he wants to be an engineer, but doesn't have anyone to help with math." Michael bent down to be at his son's height. "And what do you suggest?" "We could set up a room right here, with people who know how to teach, like Mum. Then the children would have help after school." Michael looked at his son with admiration. At 7 years old, Henry already demonstrated a sensitivity to others' needs that he himself had only developed well after 40. "You know what, it's a brilliant idea," he replied, hugging the boy. "Let's talk to your mother about it." Thus was born the Beyond School Project, a network of educational support centers that in the following months would spread to various communities in Boston. Sarah coordinated the pedagogical program, while Michael ensured the infrastructure and financial sustainability. It was a partnership that utilized the best of each one's abilities, united by a shared purpose. While professional life and social projects advanced, the personal relationship between Michael and Sarah also evolved. After 6 months officially living together as a couple, they decided to formalize the union with a small, intimate ceremony, very different from the ostentatious wedding they had held in their youth. This time, the celebration took place in Mrs. Winter's garden in Somerville, decorated with Christmas lights and flowers from the yard itself. Only close friends and family were invited, with the 3 boys playing central roles in the ceremony. Henry carried the rings, Thomas scattered flower petals along the path, and Caleb, overcoming his shyness, read a small poem he had written for the occasion. "Mom and Dad are like the sun and moon," he recited with a clear voice despite his nervousness. "Different, but together they make the sky complete." There was no extravagant party or expensive gifts. What made the day special was the authenticity of emotions, the shared certainty that, this time, they were building something true, based not on youthful romantic expectations, but on a mature love tested by time and adversities. "Are you happy?" Michael asked Sarah when they finally had a moment alone, after the guests departed and the boys fell asleep, exhausted after the celebrations. She looked at him with those dark eyes that had always hypnotized him, now marked by small lines that told stories of laughter and tears, of struggles and victories. "More than happy," she replied, intertwining her fingers with his. "I'm at peace, as if all the pieces were finally in the right place." Michael understood exactly what she meant. It wasn't the passing euphoria of a new romance, but something deeper and more lasting, the feeling of fullness that comes when we find our true place in the world. In the years that followed, the Collins-Mitchell family, they decided to keep both surnames symbolizing the union of 2 distinct paths, faced challenges like any other. There were discussions about education methods, disagreements about limits and rules, moments of fatigue and impatience. Henry, in pre-adolescence, began to question authority and test limits, demanding from Michael and Sarah a constant re-evaluation of their parental approaches. Thomas, always intense in his emotions, faced periods of anxiety that required psychological support. Caleb, although having overcome most of the respiratory problems of childhood, still needed special care during seasonal changes. But amid all these challenges, there was an unshakable certainty. They were in this together, supporting each other, finding solutions in partnership. The promise made on that balcony years ago, to try again, this time doing it right, was renewed daily through small choices and gestures. On a Sunday afternoon, almost 5 years after the casual reunion that had changed their lives, the family enjoyed a picnic at Revere Beach. The boys, now 11, 10, and 9 years old, played soccer on the sand, while Michael and Sarah observed, sitting on a colorful mat. "You know what I was thinking?" commented Sarah, leaning on his shoulder. "What?" "About how a single decision can completely change the course of a life." She paused, observing her children running and laughing under the afternoon sun. "If you hadn't decided to pass by Commonwealth Avenue that day—" Michael followed her gaze, contemplating the 3 boys who were, indisputably, the greatest joy of his existence. "Or if you hadn't chosen that specific bus stop. Or if I had told you about the pregnancy years before. Or if I hadn't been too proud to look for you after the divorce." They remained silent for a moment, absorbing the weight of all the choices, right decisions, and mistakes that had led them to this point. Then Sarah smiled, squeezing his hand. "But in the end, we found our way back to each other. And this time we're doing it right," completed Michael, kissing her softly. At that moment, as the sun began to set over Boston Harbor, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Michael contemplated the family he had almost lost by not knowing how to recognize what really mattered. The 3 boys were now running toward them, tired from the game and ready for a snack, their faces illuminated by the simple joy of a day at the beach with their parents. "Dad, did you see that goal I scored?" asked Thomas, dropping onto the mat beside him. "Yes, son, it was incredible." "But I saved the second one," protested Caleb, who had overcome much of his initial shyness and now competed for space in conversations with his brothers. "And I made." "That play the coach taught," added Henry, always seeking paternal approval. Michael hugged all three, feeling his heart overflow with gratitude. "You're amazing, you know that. All of you." Sarah observed the scene with a serene smile, her eyes reflecting the same fullness he felt. In a world of uncertainties and winding paths, they had found their safe harbor, in each other, in the children. They shared in the family they built together, piece by piece, choice by choice. That night, after putting the boys to bed, Michael and Sarah returned to the apartment's balcony, their habitual refuge for important conversations. The city shone below them, and the sea stretched to the horizon, vast and full of possibilities like the future they had chosen to share. "I have something to show you," said Michael, handing Sarah an envelope. She opened it, curious, and her eyes widened at seeing the contents. The deed to a house in Somerville, not far from where she had lived with the boys. "Michael, what is this? Remember when you said you missed the simplicity of Somerville? The sense of community, children playing in the street, neighbors who know each other by name." She nodded, still confused. "I bought that house you always admired, the corner one with the large garden. I completely renovated the interior, but kept the facade you liked so much. If you want, we can move there." Sarah looked at him, surprised. "But what about your apartment, your view of the sea, your office so close by?" "They're just walls and windows, Sarah. Home is where you four are." He smiled, holding her hands. "Besides, Mrs. Winters won't be able to make the trip here for much longer to visit us. She's already complaining about her age." Sarah laughed, moved by the gesture. It wasn't just a house he was offering, but concrete proof that he was willing to give up privileges and comforts for the family's well-being, to be closer to what really mattered. "We'll need to consult the boys," she said, always practical. "I already have. They're super excited about the idea of a yard big enough for a dog." "A dog?" Sarah raised her eyebrows, amused. "Has that been decided too?" "Well, let's say Thomas has been very persuasive in the last few weeks." They laughed, together, complicit in the small daily negotiations that composed family life. Then Sarah became serious again, studying the face of the man in front of her. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For finding your way back. To me, to the boys, to yourself." Michael hugged her, feeling the familiar sensation of gratitude that had accompanied him since the day he rediscovered his family at that bus stop. Some people spend their entire lives seeking success, wealth, recognition, only to discover too late that true happiness was much closer, much more accessible than they imagined. He had been fortunate enough to receive a second chance, an opportunity to correct mistakes, to rebuild bridges, to redefine his priorities before it was too late. And each day, with each conscious choice, each moment present in his children's lives, each gesture of partnership with Sarah, he reaffirmed his commitment to this new life they had built together. Under the silver light of the moon reflected in the harbor, Michael and Sarah sealed with a kiss the promise of a shared future. Not a perfect future, or one free from challenges, but an authentic future, built on foundations of mature